Once there was a boy who was born in the Middle East and would come to be known by history as Jesus. He lived a human life and made enough of an impact on enough people's lives that some of them wrote about him after he died because of the things he had said while alive. The various writings on Jesus and the things he had said, they did not always agree with each other, but even so, they were then incorporated into another book, one that had already existed for quite some time, a book that Jesus had specifically refuted as being helpful or true. You see, the reason Jesus' words had caused such an impact in the first place was because they said things that had not been said before, because they specifically refuted this Old Testament as being helpful or true. Yet, after his death, the authorities over the proponents of the old book saw the impact Jesus' words were having on the people, even after his death, and they decided that the best thing for them would be to not denounce him and the things he had said, but to include him and thereby dictate how others should relate to him. And it did indeed come to pass that many of the people who read this hybrid book that included the contradictory writings about him that had been altered so that they could be included in the book he had specifically refuted as being helpful or true. Well, the only information these people had about Jesus was the contradictory writings housed within and unnaturally merged with an older book he had specifically refuted as being helpful or true. And a significant number of these people became inspired by these contradictory writings on him that were housed in a book he had specifically refuted as being helpful or true. And their churches flourished for 2,000 years. And so, 2,000 years had passed when he did actually return. Once there was a boy who was born in the northwest of England in the year of 1968. This boy was Jesus returned, and yet he did not know it. His father was called David Moore. His mother was named Myrna Moore Nee Palmer, and he was born in Hope Hospital in the city of Salford. The reason for both the return of this man and his amnesia of his former life were nothing more complicated than that everybody cannot help but return here, and returning here always causes amnesia of previous times here. In other words, returning here did not mark him as special or miraculous in any way, and neither did him not remembering who he was, because both of these things happen to us all each time we return here. This time here, his parents named him Ian Moore, though he would later come to be known as Ianto. He was born specifically in England because it was good for the completion of his task that he be a native speaker of the English language. And he was born specifically in a rather rough working class part of England because it was good for the completion of his task that he develop a healthy disdain for the education system. And his peers in Salford at this time had all had this disdain inculcated in them. But he didn't know any of these reasons for the location of his birth. He only knew he was a boy of little consequence because the culture he belonged to, the street culture of Salford, was always quick to tear down anybody who showed signs of thinking they were something. This time here, it took Ianto significantly longer to awaken to the task he had come to fulfill. It was an evening in 2019 that he watched a video on YouTube about our search for the definition of the word number that became a catalyst for a philosophical revelation that the only truly objective phenomena in all existence are those truths that are incapable of ever not being true. Those truths that are not physical entities in and of themselves, but which no expression of physicality can ever contradict. The key to this revelation for him was the distinction between what qualifies as physical and what qualifies as non-physical. Contemporary understandings of physics does not recognize anything that is not physical as real. All human culture does not recognize anything that is not physical as real. Ianto saw that this was an insoluble problem for us because the only phenomenon that could ever be cited as a cause of the physical would absolutely have to be something that itself qualified as non-physical. And as human culture does not recognize that anything could ever possibly be both non-physical and real, human culture definitively blocks itself from understanding reality. The gold standard that physics holds itself to is empirical observation, the observation of the physical. The non-physical, which it is essential to understand if one wishes to understand the physical, is explicitly excluded from the consideration of physicists. But there are non-physical truths that are absolutely required to be unbreakably true in order that existence be an ongoing concern, that existence function as existence. As an example of this, perhaps the most foundational of these non-physical truths is that there are 3 spatial dimensions. This simple truth is foundational because it is so simple that it is absolutely in effect in all locations, at all times, at all scales. All of that from something non-physical. Ianto identified that which qualifies as physical is all that changes over space and time. That which qualifies as non-physical is that which does not change over space and time, because it cannot. Ianto identified that all that does change over space and time, the physical reality we know, changes as it does because it is the living iteration of truths that cannot not be true anywhere and must, therefore, be true everywhere, which, in the relative spatial and temporal terms that are always in effect, results in eternal self-aware movement, eternal balancing and rebalancing, eternal life of the living unified field, which is nothing more than truth being existentially incapable of stopping itself from being true. One revelation led to another, which led to another, and so on. Ianto came to understand clearly that he and we can and should be understood to be nothing more than truth. Truth that is existentially incapable of stopping being true. We are eternal truth. We are the eternal. Cannot possibly not be. And this is not necessarily a blessing, and it is not necessarily a curse. It is absolutely necessarily what we make it to be. By the time all of this did come about, Ianto already had 50 years of not being anything notable under his belt. And so he was both surprised and dismayed to be faced with the responsibility of so much incoming truth. Not only was he well accustomed now to being dismissed as unremarkable by the world and the people around him, and not only was he meant to refute the Old Testament as being helpful or true, but now he was also meant to refute the contradictory writings about him as being helpful or true. And in addition to all of this, he was now meant to refute all human culture's understandings of mathematics and science as being helpful or true. Ianto now saw the foundational reasons, the very simplest, most underlying of reasons for the living existence that is all of existence. The reasons that come first, before any thought of God or the Big Bang or whatever else even could have any meaning. He saw how good it was that these foundational understandings should now, at long last, come into the waking consciousness of humanity. And he saw that because humanity has built all it has so inventively built on top of a gap in our comprehension, a gap that just happens to be the simplest, most foundational knowledge that does provide the causal agent that explains all existence in general and our existence in particular. Because all we have built on top of that hole in our comprehension, the acceptance of these foundational truths inherently comes hand in hand with our realization that we have all believed in not truth in all manner of forms, and that all we do love in the things we have built, the agreements we have made, the beliefs we have drawn comfort from, they stand upon lies. All of them. Everything we have done to each other and to ourselves, the pleasant and the unpleasant, all of it to date stands upon us not knowing the truth, us not knowing the foundational truth about anything at all. Because there is and can only possibly be only one foundational reason for absolutely everything. To sum it up nice and succinct, Yanto now saw that he, the man who had spent 50 years receiving the message that he is not and has never been really very much of anything, is tasked with telling all of us that we are all wrong. Telling everybody here that they are wrong. Yanto now saw he was tasked with the most beautiful of tasks, and inevitably, for a time at least, the most thankless of tasks, telling all of us that we are wrong. If you can put to one side for a moment your own personal and inevitable defensiveness at being told that you are wrong, perhaps you may be able to connect with some empathy for the idea of anybody at all, being given the task of entering a room full of people and telling them that they are all wrong about what they believe is going on, that they have been all along. I am inviting sympathy. I am inviting compassion. I am inviting kindness for the man who knows himself to be blessed with the task of telling everybody they are wrong. It is the funniest of things. We are all absolutely aching for it, for somebody to show up here and tell us all that we are wrong, how we are wrong, and why we are wrong, and what we can usefully do about it. We are aching for that to happen. And the very idea of it terrifies us. He makes videos and MP3s for 4 years telling us all why we have been wrong all along. And this is where this parable doesn't end, but reaches an intermission, only because the rest of the parable simply hasn't happened yet. Will this world of humans respond, or will its response be to not respond, to not notice anything unusual going on at all, and continue on with business as usual? As I say, the rest of this parable is yet to be writ. And guess who it is that will be writing it? Yeah, that's right. To those Christians who tell me I cannot be him, I invite you to consider, let's say I am not him. And let's say that he does show up here in a few years, say. When that happens, is he arriving here to help you understand who you are and what you can be because of that? Or is he here to be told what he must be, because you are the one who knows what he must be? Is it that? Is that his purpose? That he returns to match your specific expectations? Because if that is the case, you do not need him to return at all. You already know more than he does. He can only, on his return, be contrary to expectation, because it is expectation born of fallacy that he is here to help correct. You do understand the sense in this. He does not come to perform a magic trick. He comes to explain how the trick is done. And that is always, at least to begin with, cause for disappointment. So be it, and let it be so. We may think that the last thing Jesus was ever going to be was a heretic, but he was always going to be that. My name is Ianto. Yes, I am Ianto the heretic. But again, I invite your empathy, your sympathy, your compassion for that. Because truly, I am the man tasked with telling all of us we are wrong. And that is a good and worthy task, a blessing and an honour for him, a blessing and a blessed relief for all of us. And it is what we are all aching for, absolutely aching for. And so, I invite you to get to know me. If you wish to see and hear me talk unrehearsed and unscripted to camera, in all my imperfect human glory, you can watch my video, I Am Jesus. If you wish to hear me talk in detail about foundational truth on a technical level, I go into this in numerous videos. If you wish to hear me talk about being the eternal as a lived human experience, I touch on this fairly often. If you wish to hear me talk about lie culture, which is all human culture to date, this is another topic I touch on frequently. If you wish to hear my personal story, what it's like for me to be going through all of this, I occasionally give updates on this. All of the videos and MP3s highlighted here are available on my website, and almost all of them are on my YouTube channel, These Beautiful Pages. I release my creative output into the public domain, and much of it is available for free download, so my work can be used, shared, and adapted by anyone who wishes to. And if you are interested in tracking the progression of the development of my understanding from just before I found out who I am, right up to now, all of the videos and MP3s on foundational truth I have produced in that time are presented in the foundational truth section of my website in chronological order. It may be interesting for some of you to observe where I refine my understanding and make corrections to earlier material. And also, on my website is a section on my artistic output, novels, poetry, music and film, which may give some insight into how I see the world, its people, and existence in general. I am a man who had already lived here as a philosophically inclined atheist for 50 years before anything as ridiculously unexpected as all of this came along. As far as I was concerned, I was just some underachiever getting on with his life. It is good that I have an archive of artistic output that I can share that serves as a record of sorts of who I have been all along, regardless of my own share of the great amnesia. You see, my consistent transparency has always been perceived of as a weakness to others. It actually took me ever such a long time to catch on to this. And I guess many considered me a fool during this time, but for sure, many around me had seen my transparency as an acute weakness of mine all along. Transparency is not a weakness. Quite the opposite. And although we can't help but fear it, coming from the place we are coming from, it is not to be feared. Transparency is a strength. Here, amidst all that is clouded, transparency is potent. And yes, to be sure, looking to make oneself transparent when one is not used to it, which is all of us, to varying degrees, myself included, it's a painful experience, a harsh process, a scrubbing, but it doesn't need to be made horrendous. My advice would be to take the time it takes to become transparent to oneself, first and foremost. How much of yourself you share with others, this is always a sacred choice, because your inner child is sacred, and that never changes. I am here, and I am a humble home hobbyist. And the power of the humble home hobbyist is the power of being unmanaged. I am not managed, nor am I managing others. I regulate myself. And I can do this because I am coherent to myself, coherent to the field. While I am essentially a fly in everybody's pie in general, because I refute all of your lie culture, I am a fly in nobody's particular pie. Well, maybe one person's particular pie, but no more than that. I am telling you that you are all wrong. And I am asking for your appreciation for that. It would be very much appreciated. Thank you.